Welcome back to Drowsy History, the channel where the past becomes a place to rest. Tonight, you're traveling to New England in the 1600s, to a world of candlelight and meeting houses, of tall pines and salt wind, and of rules. So many rules. Rules about what you could wear, what you could name your children, when you could kiss, how long you could linger over a mug of beer, and whether you were allowed to celebrate Christmas at all. Spoiler, you were not. Before we begin, if these long, quiet journeys into the past help you drift off, take a moment to subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel, and it means you'll never lose your place in history. And tonight, leave a comment with the oldest family story your family still tells. A name, a rumor, a legend passed down through the generations. And if no story has survived, simply tell us where in the world you're listening from. Reading them is one of the best parts of making these videos. Now, dim the lights, settle beneath the blankets, let your shoulders sink a little deeper into the pillow. It's time to wake up, very slowly, very gently, nearly 400 years ago, in a small wooden house on the edge of Massachusetts Bay, where the rules are already waiting for you. You wake before dawn to the smell of wood smoke. The house around you is small and dark and close, built of oak timbers cut from a forest that begins quite literally at the edge of your field. Somewhere below you, a fire that was banked down to embers last night is being coaxed back to life. You can hear the scrape of the iron shovel on the hearthstone, the soft complaint of a rooster, the wind moving through pines that were old before any English boot ever touched this shore. It is the 1600s, and you live in New England, in one of the towns scattered along the coast and rivers of Massachusetts Bay. Perhaps your parents crossed the ocean in the Great Migration of the 1630s, when whole congregations packed themselves into damp wooden ships and sailed west to build what their minister called a city upon a hill. Perhaps you were born here, in this very house, and England is only a word to you, a place in your grandmother's stories, a kingdom of bishops and maypoles and trouble. Either way, you have inherited something along with the house and the fields and the family Bible. You have inherited the rules. They are everywhere, the rules. They are written in the law books of the general court, copied out by hand, and read aloud in the meeting house so that no one can claim they didn't know. They are preached from the pulpit every Sunday and every lecture day. They are enforced by constables and magistrates, by tithingmen with long staves, by the town watch walking the lanes after dark. And most of all, they are enforced by your neighbors, because in this world, watching over one another is not considered nosiness. It is considered love. The people of your town call it holy watching. Every family has agreed, by solemn covenant, to help every other family walk the narrow path. If your fence is falling down, a neighbor will mention it. If your children are running wild, a neighbor will mention that too. And if you are seen walking somewhere you shouldn't be, at an hour you shouldn't be there, you can be quite certain that someone somewhere has taken note of it, gently, sorrowfully, and with every intention of bringing it up. To modern ears, this sounds suffocating, and some days, if you are honest, it feels that way to you too. But it's worth understanding, as you lie here in the gray light before sunrise, why the rules exist, because the people around you did not think of themselves as living in a cage. They thought of themselves as living in an ark. Your parents' generation left everything: houses, orchards, church bells, buried kin, because they believed England had lost its way. They came to this cold coast to build a society that would finally get it right. A commonwealth where the laws of the town and the laws of God would be the same laws, where no one would be too rich or too proud, where every child would learn to read, and where the whole community would rise or fall together. The rules were not decoration, the rules were the point. And so the General Court, sitting in Boston, legislated with astonishing confidence about nearly everything: how much lace you may wear, how long you may sit in a tavern, what games you may play, and where and with whom, what you may charge for a day's labor, whether you may live alone, whether a young man may so much as speak sweet words to your daughter without asking your permission first. There are rules about kissing, rules about names, rules about pies. There is a rule, in some towns, about how long you may stand around doing nothing at all. Some of these rules will strike you, 400 years from now, as wise. Some will strike you as funny. A few will strike you as almost unbelievable. Tonight, we will walk through them all, slowly, one by one, the way you might walk the lanes of the town at dusk, past the meeting house, past the ordinary with its low murmur of voices, past the stocks standing empty on the green, down to the last house where a single candle burns in the window. But all of that is still to come, for now the fire is lit, the porridge is on, and the day is beginning. Downstairs, your family is gathering for morning prayer, as the law of custom, if not quite the law of the court, expects every household to do. You pull on your clothes in the half dark. Even these, as you will soon discover, are regulated. Welcome to New England. Mind the rules. Every road in your town leads eventually to the meeting house. It stands at the center of everything, a plain, square, barn-like building, often on the highest ground the town could find, with clear glass windows and not 1 ounce of decoration. No steeple in the early years, no cross, no altar, no stained glass, no organ, no candlesticks. Your grandparents left all of that behind in England on purpose. To them, a church was not a building at all. A church was the people. The building was just a house where the people met, hence the name. And you will meet there whether you like it or not, because attendance is not a suggestion. It is the law. In Massachusetts Bay, absence from public worship without good cause can cost you a fine of 5 shillings. Real money, when a skilled workman might earn 2 shillings in a day. The constables take note of who is missing. Show up or explain yourself. But here is the strange part. Simply showing up is not enough, because you cannot sit wherever you please. Your seat is assigned. Every few years, the town appoints a committee of respected men for a task they call seating the meeting house, or more grandly, dignifying it. The committee draws up a chart of every bench and every pew, and then, with the care of generals arranging an army, they assign every family in town to its proper place according to rank. Age counts, wealth counts, public office counts, reputation counts. The foremost families sit at the front, closest to the pulpit. Ordinary farmers sit in the middle. Servants, the young and the poor, sit at the back or up in the gallery. Men sit on one side of the aisle, women on the other, and the boys, restless, whispering, incorrigible, are often packed together on the gallery stairs where a designated officer can keep an eye on them. People care desperately about these seating charts. Town records 400 years from now will still preserve the grumbling. Petitions from families who feel they've been seated beneath their dignity, complaints, appeals, the occasional feud that simmers for years over 18 inches of bench. Where you sit on Sunday is who you are in this town, and everyone knows it. Once you are seated, you will stay a while. The morning sermon commonly runs 2 hours, sometimes longer, and the minister keeps an hourglass on the pulpit beside him. When the sand runs out, he may simply turn it over and carry on. There is a second service in the afternoon. In between, on a winter's day, you huddle with your neighbors in a little shed nearby. Some towns build small Sabbath houses for exactly this purpose and thaw your hands over a fire because the meeting house itself has no heat at all. Not a stove, not a hearth, nothing but bodies and breath. In January, this is not a small matter. The meeting house is so cold that the communion bread has been known to freeze. The minister preaches in a heavy cloak, sometimes in gloves with the fingers cut away so he can turn the pages. Wealthier families bring foot stoves, little pierced metal boxes filled with hot coals from the morning fire, and dogs curl beneath the benches for warmth. The dogs, in fact, become enough of a nuisance that some towns appoint an official dog whipper whose entire job is to shoo them out of the meeting house during worship. It is a real title. Someone in your town holds it. There is no music as you would recognize it. Instruments are forbidden in worship, too popish, too theatrical, so the congregation sings the psalms unaccompanied and slowly. Since few families own psalm books and not everyone reads music, a deacon lines out each verse, chanting a line alone so the congregation can repeat it after him. The whole psalm unfolding call and response, ragged and droning and strangely beautiful, like the sound of the sea in a shell. The psalm book itself is a local achievement. The Bay Psalm Book, printed in Cambridge in 1640, the first book ever printed in English America. Your town is proud of that. And through it all moves the tithingman, the meeting house's gentle enforcer. He carries a long wooden staff, and the staff has two ends. One end is hard, a small knob or brass tip for rapping the heads of boys who giggle and men who snore. The other end, on many staves, is soft, a foxtail, a rabbit's foot, a dangling feather, for brushing delicately across the face of a drowsing woman until she startles awake. Fall asleep during the second hour of the sermon, and you may be woken by a fox's tail drawn across your nose in front of the entire town. Try not to take it personally. On a warm June afternoon, with the drone of the Psalms still in everyone's ears and the sermon deep in its second hour, half the meeting house is fighting sleep, and the tithing man is the busiest man in the room. Even here, at the very center of the rules, everyone is human. The records are full of people dozing, whispering, passing notes, counting knots in the ceiling beams. The rules press down, life pushes gently back. It is the oldest arrangement in the world. Of all the rules you live under, none reach deeper into your week than the rules of the Sabbath. And the first thing to understand is when the Sabbath begins, because it does not begin on Sunday morning. Following the reckoning of Scripture, where the evening and the morning were the first day, your Sabbath begins at sundown on Saturday, which means that every Saturday afternoon, your entire town begins to shut itself down like a great ship furling its sails. Work is finished early, tools are hung up, Saturday's supper is eaten with one eye on the light in the window. By the time the sun touches the tree line, the week is over, and a great stillness settles over the town, a stillness that will hold, unbroken, until Sunday night. For roughly 24 hours, an astonishing list of ordinary activities becomes forbidden. No work, of course, no plowing, no chopping, no spinning, no mending. But the rules go far beyond labor. No travel, except to worship or in genuine emergency. An innkeeper is not even supposed to let his guests ride onward on the Sabbath. They stay put until Monday. No sport, no games, no idle strolling. Walking in the street is permitted only if you are walking reverently to or from the meeting house. Wandering in the fields or standing about in company is profaning the Lord's day, and constables and tithingmen patrol the lanes to make sure of it. Court records from these years preserve the solemn prosecutions of people caught doing, on a Sunday, absolutely nothing in particular. Even cooking is suspect, since cooking is work. And so New England housewives develop a famous solution: dishes prepared on Saturday that can sit warm in the embers overnight. A great pot of beans, sweetened with a little molasses, buried in the coals on Saturday and eaten on Sunday, warm and ready with no labor at all. 400 years from now, people will still call Boston the home of baked beans without quite remembering why. The reason is the Sabbath. And then there is the story your descendants will find hardest to believe, the story of Captain Kemble of Boston. As it is told, the captain came home in the 1650s after 3 long years at sea. His wife met him at the door of their own house, and he did what any returning sailor would do. He kissed her. Unfortunately, it was a Sunday. For this lewd and unseemly behavior, kissing his own wife on his own doorstep on the Sabbath, the story says he was set in the stocks for 2 hours. Whether every detail happened just so, the tale has survived because everyone who heard it recognized the world it described, a world where even joy had office hours. Because that is the heart of it. The Sabbath rules are not only about what you do, but about how you feel while doing it. Unseasonable mirth is itself an offense. Laughing too loudly, singing a worldly tune, running. Children have been noted in the records for running on the Sabbath. All of it profanes the day. Sunday is for 2 long services at the meeting house, for quiet scripture at home, for catechizing the children by the fire, and for rest, nothing else. Now, before you conclude that the Sabbath was pure misery, lie back for a moment and consider what it looked like from inside a life of endless labor. 6 days a week, you work from first light to last, hauling, digging, washing, herding, hauling again. Your hands are cracked, your back aches in ways you stopped mentioning years ago. And then, every single week, without fail, the law of the entire colony descends like a snowfall and declares, enough. No one may work. No one may make you work. Your master, if you have one, cannot demand a single chore. The fields can wait. The mending can wait. Everything can wait. For the poorest servant and the most harried mother of 8, the Sabbath is the one wall in the world that even the powerful may not climb over. Farmhands doze in the afternoon sun between services. Families walk home slowly in their best clothes through the long light. The whole town breathes at the same rhythm, together once a week. There are worse rules than a mandatory day of rest. Still, you will be glad some restless Sundays when the sun finally sets, because when darkness falls on Sunday evening, the Sabbath ends as it began, with the going down of the sun. Lamps are lit, tongues loosen, a little work quietly resumes, and in some towns the young people are known to treat Sunday night with a merriness that scandalizes their elders. The week has begun again. The rules, of course, come with it. You might think that once the Sabbath ends, the church loosens its grip on your week. It does not. The meeting house casts a long shadow over every day between Sundays, and the rules that govern that shadow are some of the strangest you live under. Begin with the strangest of all. Attending church and belonging to the church are two entirely different things. Everyone must attend, that is the law, as you know. But full membership, the covenant itself, the right to take communion, and for men, in the early decades, the right to vote in colony elections. That must be earned, and the entrance exam is like nothing in Old England. To join the church, you must stand before the gathered members and give what your neighbors call a relation, a personal, public account of the work of grace in your own soul. When conviction first touched you, how you despaired, how hope arrived. The congregation listens, weighs, sometimes questions. For the tender-hearted, a minister may read a written account aloud instead, a mercy often extended to women. But there is no shortcut. In your town, you cannot simply sign up for God. You must testify and be believed. The result is one of history's odder arrangements, a colony where church attendance is compulsory for all, but church membership is exclusive, and thousands of perfectly respectable, scripture reading, Sabbath keeping people sit in the meeting house every week of their lives without ever becoming members at all. They are taxed for the church all the same. Every household in town, member or not, pays the rate that supports the minister, his salary voted at town meeting, his firewood hauled to his door by obligation, cord after cord, because a minister's woodpile is a public utility. In your town, you can decline to join the church. You cannot decline to heed it. Then there are the weekdays themselves. Thursday in Boston and many towns is lecture day, a full sermon in the middle of the working week, and one of the great social events of your world. People pour in from the countryside, the ordinaries fill, marriages are announced and proclamations read, the week's news changes hands in the doorway. Lecture day becomes so popular, in fact, that the general court grows concerned. People are traveling to so many lectures in so many towns, so often, that work is suffering, and the magistrates attempt to rein it in, urging the churches to hold fewer of them. Let that settle in your mind as you drift. The Puritan government of Massachusetts once tried to regulate church-going downward. There was too much sermon happening. Even piety in your world has a speed limit. And scattered through the calendar, replacing the abolished saints' days, come the appointed days, each with its own rules. A fast day, proclaimed in times of drought or sickness or trouble, is a Sabbath's sterner cousin. No food until evening, no work, 2 full services, the whole town hungry and praying together. A Thanksgiving day, proclaimed after harvests and mercies, is its joyful twin, sermon in the morning, feast in the afternoon. Neither arrives on a fixed schedule. Holidays in your town are not anniversaries, they are responses. The government reads the year like a letter from heaven and schedules the feelings accordingly. Even the very beginning of life comes wrapped in rules. Your children are baptized fast, commonly on the first Sabbath after birth, whatever the season. Church records and diaries preserve winter baptisms, where the meeting house stood below freezing and the water in the basin had ice broken from it. The infant held up squalling in the cold air while the congregation looked on approvingly. No godparents stand beside the parents. Godparents are a popish invention, discarded. The whole congregation is understood to be the child's witness, and it is at baptism that the child receives the name, thankful, increase, wait still, that pins the family's hopes to it forever. And at the other end of life, the rules produce the thing your descendants will find most haunting of all: the early Puritan funeral, which is a funeral with almost nothing in it. No service, no sermon at the grave, no prayers over the body, praying for the dead being useless at best and popish at worst. The community gathers, the bell tolls, and the neighbors carry their neighbor through the streets in silence to a burying ground kept deliberately plain, and lay them down and stand a while and walk home. It sounds bleak, told this way, but those who describe it record something else too. The whole town walking together, the shops shut, every hat off, grief with all the words removed, and only the carrying left. Later generations will let the words back in, and then some. In time, New England funerals will grow so elaborate, gloves and rings and scarves given to every mourner, that the government will have to step in with laws to restrain funeral spending. Your world will have traveled in a century from funerals with nothing to funerals that require sumptuary legislation. It is perhaps the most New England journey imaginable. So, no, the church does not rest between Sundays, and neither do its rules. But notice the shape of them: testify and be known, pay and be warmed, fast together, feast together, carry one another in silence when words fail. The strangeness, here as everywhere in your world, is the strangeness of a town that refuses, at any point in life, first week to last, to leave anyone unaccompanied. Go to the chest at the foot of your bed and lift the lid. Inside is everything you own that can be worn, and nearly every piece of it is regulated by law. In 1634, the General Court of Massachusetts Bay looked out upon its brand new Commonwealth, barely 4 years old, still short of food some winters, and decided that one of the most urgent matters requiring legislation was fashion. The court declared its detestation of the new and immodest fashions creeping in from England, and it got specific. No garments with gold or silver thread, no lace, no embroidered caps, and, this is the detail your descendants will love, no slashed sleeves, save that a person may have one slash in each sleeve and one in the back. Slashing was the height of English style. You cut narrow openings in the outer fabric of a sleeve so the bright lining beneath could puff through. It was dazzling, and it was expensive, and the court hated it. But notice the compromise. They did not ban slashing outright. You may have exactly one slash per sleeve. One. There were men sitting in that chamber, in the middle of a wilderness, voting on the permissible number of decorative slits in a sleeve. Then, in 1651, the court went further and tied fashion directly to your bank account. If your estate was worth less than £200, it became an offense for you to wear gold or silver lace, gold or silver buttons, silk hoods or scarves, or great boots, those magnificent, wide topped cavalier boots that folded over at the knee. Dress above your station, and you could be fined 10 shillings. The court's reasoning was written right into the law. It declared its utter detestation that men or women of mean condition should take upon them the garb of gentlemen. In other words, it is not that lace is sinful, it is that lace is for your betters. Sumptuary laws like this were ancient. England had them for centuries, but there is something almost poignant about a colony founded on leaving the Old World behind, carefully rebuilding the Old World's pecking order, one silk hood at a time. And the court records show the law was actually enforced. In a single county in 1652, dozens of people were presented at once for wearing silver lace and other finery above their rank. Some talked their way out of it by proving they were, in fact, rich enough to be fancy. Imagine standing before a magistrate on trial for your boots and winning the case by opening your account books. Women's dress carried extra scrutiny. Sleeves must reach the wrist. A law forbade short sleeves, whereby the nakedness of the arm may be discovered. Ministers preached against immodest layers of apparel, against wigs, against long hair on men, one of the fiercest and longest running controversies in early New England was, genuinely, about men's haircuts. Governor Endicott himself is remembered as a determined enemy of long locks. The godly man wore his hair short. The vain man let it flow. Sermons were preached on this. Pamphlets were written. And yet, here is where you must let go of the picture in your head. If you are imagining a town dressed all in black with big white collars and buckled hats, gently release that image because it belongs to painters and parade floats, not to your world. Black dye is expensive and fades badly. In your town, black is what wealthy men wear for their portraits and their best Sundays. Everyday New England wears what the inventories call sad colors, and sad in your century simply means serious or deep, not gloomy. Russet and rust, deep greens, warm browns, indigo blue, madder red petticoats, purple waistcoats appear in the probate records. Your town, seen from the meetinghouse door on a Sunday morning, is not a crowd of crows. It is autumn colored, a congregation dressed in the colors of oak leaves and cranberries and good dark earth. As for the famous buckled hat, no one you know owns one. Buckles on hats were never a Puritan fashion at all. They were invented by illustrators 2 centuries after your death. You wear a plain, broad-brimmed felt hat, and you would be baffled to learn that history will one day put a shiny square buckle on it and refuse, for hundreds of years, to take it off. So when you dress each morning, you are performing a quiet calculation that everyone in town knows by heart. Warm enough, modest enough, plain enough, and precisely as fine as your rank allows, not one thread finer. Clothing is a language here, and the grammar is enforced in court. The sumptuary laws you've just heard are only the visible edge of something larger, because in your town, rank is not merely reflected in what you wear. It is written into your very name, and the rules governing it are enforced with a precision your descendants will find almost comical. Consider the words Mr. and Mistress. 400 years from now, they will be sprinkled on everyone. In your world, They are titles, reserved like silk hoods and great boots for the few. Only gentlemen bear the title Mr., magistrates, ministers, men of education, men of substantial estate. Their wives and daughters are Mrs., married or not, for it marks rank, not wedlock. Below them stands the great respectable middle of your town, and they have their own titles, sturdy as homespun, goodman and goodwife. Goodman Fletcher farms the north field. Goodwife Reed, Goody Reed to her neighbors, keeps the best garden on the lane. A goodman is a householder in good standing, and the title is no small thing. It says the town has looked at you and found you solid. And below that, no title at all. Servants, laborers, the young, the transient, called by their bare names. Everyone knows exactly where the lines sit, and the courts patrol them from both sides. Claim a title above your station, and you invite correction. But the truly strange rule is that the title can be taken away. In the colony's earliest years, a settler named Josias Plaistove was convicted of stealing corn, and the court, alongside the ordinary penalties, added one more, recorded without a flicker of irony. He was henceforth to be called by the name of Josias, and not Mr. Plaistoway as formerly. Demotion from gentleman by court order as a criminal sentence. In your world, a man's honorific has a legal status somewhere between a diploma and a driver's license. And yes, it can be suspended. The ranking impulse reaches everywhere. At Harvard College, the students are not listed alphabetically. Each entering class is officially ranked by the dignity of their families, and a young man's place in that list determines where he sits at meals, where he stands in processions, even the order in which he is served. For 4 years, your surname's social weight is your student number. The college will keep this system for well over a century. Meanwhile, back home, the same arithmetic decides the meetinghouse seating you've already visited. The order names appear in town records, and who defers to whom at every doorway in town. Because deference in your world is not a feeling, it is a set of physical rules. The hat comes off to your betters. A boy uncovers to a goodman to a gentleman, everyone to the magistrate. Children bow or curtsy to their parents. Some households expect it every morning and evening, and address them as honored sir and honored mother. The letters that survive from dutiful sons will read to later ears like correspondence with a beloved employer. The young rise when the old enter. Refusing these courtesies is not rudeness. It is a small act of rebellion against the order of the world, and there are people in your century, the Quakers most famously, whose refusal to doff their hats to any man will be treated as something close to sedition. And yet, hold the picture a moment longer, because it is stranger than simple snobbery. The same courts that protect a gentleman's title will fine that gentleman for oppression if he gouges his neighbors. You have heard what happened to one of Boston's richest merchants. The servant at the bottom of the ladder, with no title at all, has enforceable rights his cousins in England would envy. His master owes him food, lodging, instruction in a trade, and, by the law you already know, his letters. A servant who is mistreated can complain to the magistrates, and the records show servants doing exactly that and winning. Masters admonished, fined, ordered to make amends, and in serious cases, servants freed from their contracts outright. Rank in your town runs on a strange double rule. Everyone must honor those above them, and everyone above answers for those below. Even old age is a rank, perhaps the most honored one. In a world that reads long life as a mark of providence, gray hair outranks a good deal of money. The aged sit in the foremost seats, regardless of estate. Their counsel is solicited at town meeting. The Catechism itself teaches children that honoring the old is commanded from Sinai. Your town may misjudge many things, but it has decided, as a matter of settled policy, that the most important people in the room are the ones who have been in it longest. So when two neighbors pass on the lane by your house, a lifted hat, a good morrow, Goodman Hale, a good morrow to you, Mr. Simons, you are watching the whole invisible architecture flex and hold, rank and duty, honor and obligation, each man carrying his exact station like a lantern. Your descendants will dismantle nearly all of it, title by title, bough by bough. About the only pieces they will keep are the odd fossil mister before every man's name, the gentleman's title, handed out at last to absolutely everyone, and somewhere in old New England, on a weathered gravestone under the pines, the words "Here lies Goody," still holding her rank after 400 years. Suppose now that you are young, and that across the meeting-house aisle, on the other side, with the women, there is someone you cannot stop thinking about. In your worlds, even this, perhaps, especially this, is governed by rules. The first rule: you may not simply court her. Before a young man can pursue a young woman's affections, he must obtain the consent of her father or master. This is not merely custom, it is statute. Massachusetts law forbids any man to draw away the affections of a maid without the leave of her parents, and the courts enforce it. Young men are fined in these years for inveigling, the law's own word, the affections of young women without permission. There are men in the records fined and admonished for making love, as the old phrase went, meaning nothing more scandalous than sweet talk, to a maid whose father had said no. One persistent suitor in Massachusetts was hauled into court repeatedly for continuing to pursue a young woman after her father refused him. He would not give up. The fines kept coming. So you go to her father, you sit by his fire, you state your prospects, your acres, your trade, your character, and the two families negotiate like the small kingdoms they are. If all parties consent, including, it must be said, the young woman herself, for New England is firm that a marriage requires the free consent of both parties, and parents who unreasonably block a match can themselves be taken to court by their own children. Then you may begin courting in earnest. And when the day comes, the wedding will be the strangest wedding your English grandparents could imagine, because no minister will perform it. In early New England, marriage is not a sacrament. It is a civil contract, and for decades it is actually illegal for clergy to conduct weddings. You are married by a magistrate, in a house, on an ordinary weekday, in an ordinary room. Your intention to marry has been published in advance, announced publicly, or posted at the meeting house, so that anyone with an objection has had their chance. The ceremony is brief and plain. There is no ring. Wedding rings are rejected as a popish relic, a bit of empty ceremony. There is no church, no procession, no music, no giving away, no veil. What is there? A dinner, usually. Sack posset, a warm, spiced drink of milk and wine, passed around. Cake. Quiet toasts of goodwill, if the magistrates aren't looking too closely. And then ordinary life resumed the next morning, with two names now entered side by side in the town book. But do not mistake plainness for coldness. Here is the myth to bust tonight, and it is a big one. The Puritans were not against love, and they were certainly not against what accompanies it. They wrote some of the warmest love letters of their century. John Winthrop, the colony's own governor, the sternest face in the room, wrote to his wife Margaret as my sweet wife, and signed himself thy faithful husband, counting the days of their separations. The two of them agreed to think of each other every Monday and Friday at 5 o'clock, wherever they were. These are not the letters of people who disapproved of love. More than that, in New England's understanding, affection within marriage was not merely permitted, it was required. Husbands and wives owed one another tenderness. The ministers preached it as a duty, and the community enforced it in both directions. A Boston church in these years disciplined a man because he refused to live affectionately with his wife. The congregation treated his coldness as an offense. Courts fined husbands and wives for harsh words against each other. A spouse deserted or mistreated could petition the court, and the court would act. Marriage here is a covenant, and both parties can be held to its terms, terms that include kindness. The result, strange as it may sound, is that your marriage will be watched over by the entire town, the way everything else is, firmly, intrusively, and with the genuine expectation that it should make you happy. Weddings without rings, courtship by permission slip, romance regulated like fence lines, and underneath it all, a society quietly insisting that a husband speak gently to his wife or answer for it. You could do worse. In your world, the true unit of society is not the individual. It is the household, what the ministers like to call a little commonwealth. Every person in town is supposed to belong to one, and the law holds the head of each household responsible for everyone under his roof: wife, children, servants, apprentices, the orphan bound out to you, the hired man in the loft. Their behavior is your business. Their souls, in a real sense, are your liability. This is why one of the strangest rules of your world exists. It is effectively illegal to live alone. Single persons, young men especially, are required to place themselves in some orderly family, under family government. A bachelor who tries to set up housekeeping by himself will be visited by the selectmen and assigned like a stray letter to a household that will take him in and answer for him. Towns keep watch for solitary livers the way they keep watch for stray cattle. A person outside a family is a person outside the watching, and that, to your neighbors, is simply not safe, not for the town, and not for him. Within the household, the law reaches all the way to the fireside. By a Massachusetts law of 1642, every parent and master must ensure that the children in their care learn to read well enough, the law specifies, to understand the principles of religion and the capital laws of the country. And this is enforced. The selectmen of your town have the authority to visit homes and examine the children, to stand in your hall and ask your 10-year-old to read aloud and recite the catechism. Families that neglect this duty can be fined. In stubborn cases, the law goes further. Children can be removed from a negligent household and placed with masters who will see them taught. Illiteracy in your town is not a private misfortune. It is a public offense. 5 years later comes the law your descendants will remember best with the finest name any statute ever had, the Old Deluder Satan Act of 1647. Its logic is right there in the opening line, since it is one chief project of that old deluder, Satan, to keep men from the knowledge of the Scriptures. Every town of 50 households must appoint someone to teach reading and writing, and every town of 100 households must maintain a grammar school. Towns that fail to comply are fined. Out of the fear of the devil comes something remarkable: a public school system, by law, in the wilderness 2 centuries early. By the end of your century, New England will be one of the most literate places on the face of the earth. Even your children's names follow the rules, not written rules this time, but rules of the heart. The old saints' names smell of popery to your neighbors, so families reach instead straight into Scripture and straight into virtue. In your town there are children named Thankful and Patience, Increase and Preserved, Remember and Wait Still and Hope Still. The Brewster family of Plymouth, famously, raised children named Love, Wrestling, Fear, and Patience. A name in your world is a small sermon your parents preach over you every time they call you into supper, a hope pinned to you for life. Wait still, upon the Lord. Somewhere down the lane, a mother is calling preserved home for dinner, and no one finds it strange at all. Evenings in the household run to a pattern as fixed as the seating in the meeting house. Supper, then family worship, a chapter of Scripture read aloud by the father, a psalm, prayers, the children catechized, question and answer, the little ones mouthing along before they can read. Ministers call the family the seminary of church and commonwealth, the seedbed where everything else is grown, and they mean it. A town, they say, is only ever as godly as its firesides. To be a child in your town is to be born directly into the thick of the rules, and to spend your whole childhood being fitted for them, the way you are fitted for shoes. It begins with letters. Long before the town school, there is the dame school, a neighbor woman's kitchen, where the smallest children of the lane gather to learn their alphabet, while she spins and keeps the pot from boiling over. Each child carries a horn book, not a book at all, really, but a little wooden paddle with a single printed page fastened to it, the alphabet and the Lord's Prayer, sheathed under a thin, transparent sheet of polished horn so that small fingers cannot smudge or tear it. A whole education, weatherproofed with a handle. Children wear them on cords at their belts. Your first school book in this town is built like a tool, because that is precisely what your neighbors think it is. Then comes the town school, for those towns big enough to be bound by the law you already know. And school here is not the gentle half-day of later centuries. The grammar school keeps the hours of a farm, gathered at 6 or 7 in the morning in summer, working straight through, dismissed at 4 or 5 in the evening, 6 days a week, with only the Sabbath and the occasional lecture day for relief. The masters teach reading, writing, ciphering, and in the grammar schools, endless, relentless Latin, because Latin is the door to the university and the ministry. Boston's Latin School opens its doors in 1635, a full year before the college it feeds, and it will still be teaching 400 years from now, the oldest school in what will become America, older than the country by a century and a half. But the strangest rule of childhood in your world is not about school at all. It is this: at some point around the age of 10 or 12 or 14, there is a very good chance your parents will send you away, not in disgrace and not from poverty, but on purpose as good parenting. New England families routinely place their half grown children out into other households, boys bound as apprentices to learn a trade, girls placed as help to learn housewifery, and even the children of prosperous families exchanged into the homes of relatives and neighbors of equal standing. The custom is called putting out, and everyone does it, which means that most households in your town contain, at any given moment, somebody else's teenager, while their own is up the road learning the cooper's trade or the minister's Latin. The reasoning, as near as your descendants will be able to reconstruct it, is disarmingly honest. Parents, your neighbors believe, love their own children too tenderly to govern them properly in the difficult years, and so the town quietly swaps its adolescents on the theory that another man's roof teaches what a father's fondness cannot. It is either the strangest child rearing rule in this whole story or the most knowing, possibly both. An apprenticeship, mind you, is not servitude with a kinder name. It is a contract enforceable in court, and it binds the master far more heavily than your descendants will assume. In exchange for the child's labor and obedience, the master owes food, clothing, lodging, complete instruction in his trade, and this is written into indenture after indenture and required by the colony's law, the child's letters and catechism. He must see the boy taught to read, whether at his own fireside or at the town school, or answer for it to the selectmen. A master who fails, or worse, is not beyond reach. Apprentices and their kin complain to the magistrates, and the records show the courts listening, masters admonished, terms amended, and children in the serious cases taken away and placed better. The town lends its children out. It does not let go of them. And when the young are done being governed for the day, and gather in the ways young people have gathered since the beginning of the world, the rules follow them there too, puffing slightly. The court records of your century are dotted with prosecutions for disorderly night meetings of young people, knots of servants and farmers' sons and daughters convening in barns and kitchens after dark, with cider and laughter, and the magistrates darkly note mixed company. Towns pass orders against youths congregating in the streets in the evening, against frolicking on the eve of the Sabbath, against, in the timeless phrase of one exasperated court, vain and unprofitable mirth. Read enough of these entries, and a wonderfully familiar picture assembles itself across 4 centuries. The young people of godly New England, catechized from birth, schooled from dawn to dusk, and still slipping out after the 9 o'clock bell, generation after generation, to be 16 somewhere the tithingman isn't. For the few boys who climb the whole ladder, dame school, grammar school, Latin, there waits the strangest rule book of all, Harvard College, where the laws of the house govern nearly every waking act. Scholars rise for prayers before dawn and hear more prayers before bed. They may not visit taverns, may not keep cards or dice, may not play except at appointed times in the college yard, and most gloriously, by the college's own laws, they are to speak Latin at all times within its walls, not in class, at all times. 2 17-year-olds passing on a staircase in the Massachusetts woods, complaining about breakfast, are expected to complain in the tongue of Cicero. Fines for missed prayers are levied in pennies and kept in the college ledger. The freshmen, by iron custom, run errands for the older students. It is, in every recognizable particular, a modern college, the resident advisor, the demerit system, the hazing of first years, invented 3.5 centuries early and conducted, at least officially, entirely in Latin. So the child of your town grows up inside the rules, like a sapling inside a fence, hornbook at the belt, Latin in the satchel, indenture in the town book, until one day the fence comes away and the tree, to everyone's quiet satisfaction, has grown straight. Then the town hands over the last rule of childhood, the one that turns it into adulthood, your turn to hold the fence for the next one. It is nearly supper time in your Puritan town, so let us talk about the rules of food. Because, yes, of course, there are rules about food, there are rules about everything, and the table is no exception. Start with the bread, because the bread is regulated by name. Under the Old English custom, your colony carries over the assize of bread. A baker is not free to bake what he pleases and charge what he likes. The law fixes the weight of the loaf against the current price of grain. When wheat is cheap, the penny loaf must be heavy. When wheat is dear, it may be lighter, but its weight is always prescribed, published, and checked. And here is the detail to smile at in the dark. Every baker is required to have his own distinct mark stamped into every loaf he sells, so that a short-weighted loaf can be traced straight back to the oven that cheated. The clerk of the market may weigh any man's bread at will, and bread found wanting is forfeit. 400 years before anyone speaks of consumer protection, your town has traceable, regulated, inspector weighed bread, because bread is life, and life in your town does not go unwatched. What is actually on the table is humbler than the regulations guarding it. The everyday loaf is not white wheat bread, but rye and Injun, rye flour and Indian cornmeal together, dense and dark and sweet. Breakfast and supper alike are often pottage or hasty pudding, cornmeal stirred soft and eaten with milk or a thread of molasses. There is the Sabbath pot of beans you already know, and over everything in every season, in every form, stewed, baked, boiled into the bread itself, reigns the pumpkin, the vegetable that carried New England through its hungry first years. The settlers themselves joke about it in a rhyme your town still sings. We have pumpkin at morning and pumpkin at noon. If it was not for pumpkin, we should be undone. The first strange food rule of New England is unwritten but universal. Thou shalt eat the pumpkin and be glad of it. Now watch how the meal is conducted, because the table has a liturgy of its own. Grace is said standing, before the meal and after it, thanks on both ends, arrival and departure. The father is served first and speaks first. In many households, the younger children do not sit at all. They stand at the table through the meal, or wait at a side table, eating what is passed to them, speaking only when spoken to, and the conduct books of your world spell out the rules a child must keep at meat with glorious specificity. Do not sing, do not hum, do not lean, do not stare at the food, do not ask for anything, do not throw bones under the table. A meal, like a meeting house, has assigned places and expected silences. The equipment would surprise your descendants too. You eat from a trencher, a wooden plate often shared, 2 people to a trencher, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, eating companionably from the same hollow square of wood. You eat with a spoon, a knife, and your fingers, because there is almost certainly not a fork in your house. Forks are a newfangled vanity from the old world. The story goes that Governor Winthrop owned one of the first forks in New England, arrived in its own case, and it remained for years a curiosity rather than a custom. An entire godly commonwealth, regulating the weight of its bread to the ounce, eating its dinner with its hands, and seeing no contradiction whatsoever. Even the calendar of food carries a strange rule, strange because it is a rule reversed. In Old England, the church calendar told everyone when to feast and when to fast. Fish on Fridays, no meat in Lent. Your neighbors threw the entire system overboard as popish superstition, and threw it so hard that the old fish days became faintly suspect. In early New England, conspicuously eating fish every Friday could raise an eyebrow. It looked like keeping the old superstition. Your town fasts, and fasts hard, but only when the government proclaims it, for its own reasons, on its own dates. No food until sundown on a fast day, pies and plenty on a Thanksgiving day. And in between, no sacred menu at all. It may be the only society in the century where eating dessert in Lent is orthodox and eating fish on Friday is questionable. And of sweetness, there is little, which is its own quiet rule of life. Sugar is precious, spice is wealth. A loaf of white sugar hangs in the account books like jewelry. The everyday sweeteners are molasses and honey, and the maple sugar you learn of from your native neighbors. Which makes the exceptions shine. The election cake baked huge and rich when the town votes, the gingerbread on training day, the Thanksgiving pies ranked golden on the sideboard. In a world of brown bread and pottage, sweetness is not routine. It is an event, scheduled like everything else here by the calendar of the Commonwealth. We are halfway through the rules now, and supper in your town is ending. The second grace said, the trenchers wiped, the children released from their stations. So here is tonight's question to carry toward sleep, and to leave in the comments if you're still awake. Of all the rules so far, the assigned pews, the silent Sabbath, the permission slips for courtship, the title you'd have to earn, the fork you wouldn't own, which one would you have broken first? Be honest. The tithing man isn't listening anymore, and when you've answered, settle in deeper, because the evening is coming on and the strangest rules of the New England night are still ahead. Here is a fact about your town that will surprise nearly everyone listening 400 years from now. It is required by law to have a tavern, not permitted, required. Massachusetts law directs towns to maintain a house of entertainment, an ordinary, as you call it, for the refreshment of travelers, and towns that fail to keep one can be fined by the court. Picture that for a moment. A colony famous for its strictness, prosecuting a town for not having a bar. The reason is simple. In your world, drink is not vice. Drink is food. The water is distrusted, often rightly, in the crowded ports, and so everyone drinks beer and cider every day at every meal from childhood on. Most of it is small beer, brewed weak in your own kitchen, more nourishment than intoxicant. The minister drinks beer, the magistrate drinks beer. Harvard College, when it opens its doors, will have its own brew house, and there is a record of an early Harvard president getting in trouble partly because the students weren't being supplied with enough beer. One of your ministers will famously call drink a good creature of God. But And here the rules come rushing in. The good creature must be used lawfully. And so the ordinary, that required and respectable institution at the center of town, is wrapped in more regulations than nearly any other building in New England. The keeper must be licensed, and licenses go only to persons of sober and good repute. Keeping an ordinary is closer to holding public office than running a business, and the keeper is often one of the most respected men in town, sometimes a deacon of the church. He is bound by law to keep order in his house, and the law tells him precisely what order means. There are limits on how much he may serve one person at a sitting. There are limits on how long a local man may linger. Laws against tippling set the allowance at about half an hour, and no later than 9 o'clock at night. The ordinary exists for travelers and for honest refreshment, not for townsmen to sit in all evening. A constable or tithingman can and does walk in, look around, and take names. Drunkenness itself is punished on a rising scale, a fine for the first offense, more for the second, and for the habitual drunkard harder remedies, the stocks, or the strangest one, a public label. Repeat offenders in Massachusetts could be ordered to wear a letter D cut in red cloth and worn on the outside of the garment so that every neighbor knew. And the town could go one step further still. The names of known drunkards were posted, and it became an offense for any tavern keeper to serve them at all. Your town, in effect, maintains an official do not serve list, published for all to see. Then there is the rule your descendants will find most baffling of all. In 1639, Massachusetts banned toasting. The custom of drinking healths, raising your cup, and drinking to someone's health was outlawed as a useless ceremony that led to excess, drawing on wine, as the court put it, beyond what nature desired. For years, it is technically against the law in your colony to say cheers. Men are presented in court for it. The law proves so unenforceable that it is eventually repealed, the court more or less admitting that it could not stop New Englanders from wishing each other well over a mug, but for a while, the clink of cups is contraband. And yet, for all the rules, the ordinary is one of the warmest rooms in your world. On court days and lecture days and training days, it fills with neighbors and news. Travelers bring word from Boston and beyond. Bargains are struck by the fire. The town's business is half done over cider. The great low room with its settles and its tobacco smoke, regulated tobacco, mind you. There are rules about where you may smoke, and lighting a pipe outdoors near barns and haystacks can bring a fine for fear of fire, is as close as your town comes to a living room shared by everyone. So this is the balance your world strikes, strange and careful. A tavern in every town by order of the court, beer on every table by the grace of God, and a tithing man in the doorway at 8:30, politely reminding you that the good creature keeps early hours. If the rules of drink are complicated, the rules of play are simpler. Most play is forbidden. Start with the games. Cards and dice are outlawed, not merely gambling with them, but in the early years having them at all. An early Massachusetts order directed households to rid themselves of cards and dice entirely. Games of chance offend on 2 counts. They waste time, which belongs to God, and they appeal to fortune, which does not exist. Nothing in your world happens by luck, and pretending otherwise borders on blasphemy. So the deck of cards your grandfather might have carried in England is here quiet contraband, and every so often the courts fine a knot of servants caught playing at cards in a barn. In 1647, the General Court took aim at a menace you might not expect: shuffleboard. The game, sliding weights along a polished table, had become popular in the ordinaries, and the court banned it from all houses of common entertainment, on the grounds that much precious time was spent unfruitfully upon it. 3 years later, the court noticed that people had simply switched games, and it added bowling to the ban. The pattern will repeat for decades. The town invents a pastime, the court prohibits the pastime, the town invents another. Boston in 1657 banned football in the streets, the wild, surging folk version of the game, played by mobs of boys and apprentices with a stuffed leather ball, which had a way of ending in broken windows, and worse. Dancing occupies a special category of suspicion. It is not quite illegal everywhere, all the time, but mixed dancing, men and women together, is preached against with tremendous energy. And when a dancing master has the nerve to open a school in Boston, the authorities and ministers between them see it shut. One notorious dancing master is prosecuted and leaves town. The theater is not even a question. There is no theater in New England, and there will not be one in your lifetime, nor your grandchildren's. And then there is the story of the maypole, the one moment when all these rules collided with an actual party. In the 1620s, at a little settlement called Marymount, not far from Plymouth, a merry, mischievous Englishman named Thomas Morton set up a towering maypole, 80 feet of pine with antlers nailed to the top, and invited all comers, servants and traders, neighbors, to dance around it with drink and song in the full Old English style. To the godly towns nearby, this was the end of the world in miniature. Plymouth sent Captain Miles Standish to arrest Morton, and when Governor John Endicott later visited the place, he had the maypole itself chopped down, rebuking the revelers, and tradition says, renaming the site Mount Dagon after a fallen idol. The most famous party in early New England ended with the guest of honor deported and the decorations put to the axe. So what is left? What may you actually do for fun in a world that has outlawed cards, dice, shuffleboard, bowling in taverns, street football, mixed dancing, maypoles, and the theater? More than you'd think, because the rules, read closely, are aimed less at pleasure than at idleness. Hunting and fowling and fishing are perfectly lawful. They put food on the table. Training days, when the town militia musters on the green, turn into unofficial festivals. Marching and mock skirmishes in the morning, and then foot races, wrestling, shooting at marks, cider, and gingerbread all afternoon, with the whole town watching. House raisings and huskings gather half the county to work and feast in the same breath. There is a well-known husking custom that whoever finds a red ear of corn may claim a kiss, and the ministers grumble about huskings in a way that suggests the custom was thriving. Election days come with a special rich cake. Harvard students bowl and swim and skate, mostly legally. The trick you learn young is that joy in your town must always travel under escort, accompanied by work or food or civic duty or the militia. Pure play, play for its own sake, sits under a shadow, but play that has put on a waistcoat and found itself a respectable errand, that walks the streets of your town in broad daylight, and even the tithingman smiles at it. And now we come to the rule that your descendants will simply refuse to believe until they look it up. In Massachusetts, for a generation, Christmas was against the law. The statute is real, and it is wonderfully blunt. In 1659, the General Court ordered that anybody found observing Christmas or the like festivals by forbearing labor, feasting, or any other way shall pay for every such offense 5 shillings. Read that list again. Feasting, 5 shillings. Any other way of celebrating, 5 shillings. And the first item, forbearing labor. You could be fined for taking Christmas Day off. The law required you, on the 25th of December, to go to work. To understand this, you have to hear the word Christmas the way your neighbors hear it. First, they can find no warrant for it in Scripture. No verse commands the feast, and the date itself, they note, was borrowed from pagan midwinter festivals. Christ Mass, even the name has the Popish Mass sitting right inside it. And second, they remember what Christmas actually looked like back in England. Not a quiet family morning, but 12 days of misrule, drunken wassailing, mobs going house to house demanding food and drink, gaming, disorder, the world turned upside down. One of your ministers calls the whole season Fool's Tide. When your neighbors banned Christmas, they weren't banning a silent holy night. In their minds, they were banning a colossal, weeks-long, kingdom-wide office party. The feeling ran deep from the very beginning. Nearly 40 years before the law, on Christmas Day of 1621 in Plymouth, Governor William Bradford led the settlers out to work as on any other day. Some newcomers excused themselves, saying it went against their consciences to work on Christmas. Very well, said Bradford, until he came home at noon and found them in the street, hard at play, pitching the bar and playing stool ball, an early cousin of cricket. Bradford confiscated their bats and balls on the spot, informing them, with what one imagines was a very level voice, that it was against his conscience that they should play while others worked. If they wished to keep Christmas as a matter of devotion, they could do it quietly indoors. There would be no gaming or reveling in the streets. It is one of the first recorded Christmas scenes in New England. The governor walking home with an armful of confiscated sporting goods. So on December 25th in your town, the shops are open. The school is open. The meeting house is closed. It is pointedly an ordinary day, unless it happens to fall on the Sabbath. Ships are loaded, wood is chopped, lessons are recited, and somewhere behind a shut door, quietly, an Anglican family or a knot of sailors down from the harbor might mark the day with a private dinner and keep their voices low, 5 shillings hanging in the air over the pudding. The law itself lasted 22 years. Under pressure from England, it was repealed in 1681. But here is the remarkable part. Repealing the law changed almost nothing. Christmas remained deeply unfashionable in New England for another century and a half. Judge Samuel Sewall of Boston would note in his diary year after year, with evident satisfaction, that the shops were open on December 25th and business went on as usual. Public schools in parts of New England were still holding classes on Christmas Day into the 1800s. Christmas did not become a legal holiday in Massachusetts until 1856, 2 full centuries after the ban. In place of the old holidays, your world keeps its own kind of special days, appointed as events warrant, days of public thanksgiving after a good harvest or a safe deliverance, days of fasting and humiliation in times of trouble. A Thanksgiving day means a sermon, and then, yes, a feast. Turkey and pies, and the whole family gathered. Everything Christmas was accused of being, but scheduled by the government and aimed at gratitude. Your descendants will keep exactly one of these on the fourth Thursday of November, without ever quite realizing that it is the Puritans' replacement for Christmas, the one holiday the rules approved. In your town, words are not free. Words are weighed, recorded, repeated, and with remarkable frequency, prosecuted. If you could open the county court records and tally what actually brought your neighbors before the magistrates, you would find that one of the largest categories, year after year, is not theft and not violence. It is talk. Begin with swearing. Profane oaths are against the law, not merely frowned upon, but priced. A single profane oath can cost you a fine of 10 shillings or an hour in the stocks, and constables are empowered to collect on the spot. And your neighbor's definition of swearing is broader than yours will be. It centers on oaths, swearing by God's name or by anything at all in casual speech. The Puritans take the commandment against vain oaths with total seriousness. Even the mild old English curses your grandfather used, worn smooth as pebbles, are contraband here. Men are fined in these years for a single hot word thrown after a stubborn ox. Then there is lying, which in your colony is not just a sin, but a civil offense. A person convicted of an open and pernicious lie can be fined 10 shillings, and for repeat offenders, set in the stocks. Children who lie are dealt with at home. Adults who lie are dealt with in court, and the record will say in ink that lasts 4 centuries that on such a date, such a person of such a town was fined for lying. Imagine your least careful statement of the week, preserved forever in a public archive with your name attached. But the crown jewel of speech regulation is defamation. Your neighbors sue each other over words constantly, over being called a knave, a cheat, a witch, a thief, a liar, over insults muttered at a fence line and repeated at a well. And this is not pettiness, or not only pettiness. In a town where everything runs on reputation, credit, marriage, church membership, your seat in the meetinghouse, an insult is an attack on your livelihood. The courts treat it that way. Slander cases fill the dockets. Remedies are practical. Fines, yes, but very often the court orders a public apology. The offender must stand up, sometimes in the meeting house before the whole congregation, sometimes at the town post, and unsay the words out loud where everyone who heard the insult can hear the retraction. There are special words for people whose tongues become a public problem. A woman who quarrels loudly and often may be labeled a common scold. A man who spreads discord, a sour of contention. Persistent offenders face escalating shame. Among the strangest punishments in the records, some offenders were ordered to stand in public with a paper pinned to them, describing the offense in large letters, or to wear a letter of cloth on the sleeve for a season. The town does not generally want your money, and it does not want your suffering. What it wants, with an almost desperate intensity, is your acknowledgement, the words taken back, the record set straight, the community made whole. And note who else falls under the rules of speech. Everyone, upward as well as downward. Speaking contemptuously of ministers is an offense, but so is a minister railing intemperately from the pulpit. So is a magistrate abusing his place. Criticizing the government in a seditious manner will get you fined, but there are also cases of courts punishing officials for insulting ordinary citizens. The ideal, never perfectly reached, is a town where nobody, high or low, may wound a neighbor with words and simply walk away. There is one more speech rule so odd it deserves its own moment. You must be careful even with your praise. Excessive flattery, extravagant compliments, telling people what they wish to hear, the ministers class it with lying, a bending of truth for advantage. Plain speech is the ideal, yes meaning yes, no meaning no, prices stated honestly, opinions given straight. Your town has, in effect, outlawed both trash talk and sweet talk, and asks you to live your whole verbal life in the narrow, honest country in between. Now for a rule that governs not what you do, but the empty spaces in your day. In your town, doing nothing is illegal. The Massachusetts court order is almost poetic in its bluntness. No person, householder or other, shall spend his time idly or unprofitably under pain of such punishment as the court shall think meet, and it is enforced. Constables and selectmen are specifically instructed to take note of idle persons, to observe how every family and every person is employed, and unexplained leisure is a matter for the magistrates. There are entries in the court records of men presented for idleness, for misspending their time, for sleeping in the fields at noon, for in one memorable case from these decades, spending too much time fowling when his family's affairs wanted tending. A man was brought before authority, that is, for excessive duck hunting. Behind the rule stands a whole theology. Your neighbors believe every person is given a calling, a particular station and work assigned by God, and that time itself is alone, to be accounted for down to the hour. Idleness is not rest. Rest is lawful, commanded even one day in 7. Idleness is theft, stealing time from God, bread from your family, and strength from the commonwealth. The devil, every child in your town can recite, finds work for idle hands. The rules of work reach into wages and prices too. In the 1630s, with labor scarce and half the colony trying to build houses at once, carpenters and other skilled men began charging what the market would bear, and the court stepped in and capped their wages at 2 shillings a day, with fines not only for the workmen who took more, but for the employer who paid more. Price controls followed on goods. Merchants who charged excessively could be prosecuted for oppression. That is the actual legal term, oppression by prices. And one of Boston's wealthiest merchants was famously fined a staggering sum and admonished before his church besides for taking too much profit on nails and thread and buttons. In your town, gouging your neighbors is not sharp business. It is an offense against God's order, and it will cost you. But the strangest work rule of all governs people who have no work in your town, strangers. New England towns practice something called warning out. A newcomer who arrives without property or prospects can be formally warned by the constable, given notice, recorded in the town book, that the town does not accept responsibility for him. Entertain a visitor in your own house beyond a couple of weeks without the town's permission, and you can be fined for it. Hospitality itself is regulated because every guest is a potential public charge. Some towns require newcomers to post bond or to obtain formal admission before settling at all. Your town, in other words, has a guest list, and the selectmen keep it. Seen from one angle, this is a hard, cold rule, a closed door with a ledger behind it. But turn it over, and you find the warm side of the same arrangement. The reason the town guards its membership so jealously is that membership means something. If you belong, if your name is in the book, the town is obligated to you. If your barn burns, your neighbors rebuild it. If you fall sick, the town pays for your nursing. If you are widowed, the selectmen see that your wood gets chopped and your children are placed well. There are entries in town records ordering firewood delivered to poor widows through the winter at the town's expense. No one who belongs is allowed to starve, and no one who belongs is allowed to be idle. The two rules are the same rule, really. Everyone is held, and everyone is held responsible. So you work, sunup to sundown, at your calling, 6 days in 7, watched by the selectmen, capped by the court, catechized on the value of every passing hour. And on the 7th day, the same law that forbade your idleness all week forbids your labor, absolutely. And you rest with a clear conscience, because rest, taken at the appointed time, is the most lawful thing in the world. Pull back now and look at the town itself, because the town as a body has rules of its own and offices of its own to enforce them, and some of those offices will sound like jokes to your descendants. They were not jokes. Men were elected to them, sworn to them, and fined for refusing to serve in them. Every March, at town meeting, your neighbors gather in the meetinghouse and elect the year's officers, selectmen, constables, clerks, those you'd expect. But then the list continues. Fence viewers, sworn officers whose duty is to walk the property lines and inspect the fences, because a bad fence means loose cattle in a neighbor's corn, and loose cattle in corn is how feuds begin. The fence viewer exists, quite literally, to make good neighbors. Hog reeves, charged with policing the town's pigs. Every hog running loose must be yoked and have a ring in its nose to keep it from rooting up the common, and the hog reeve enforces the ring. Field drivers to impound stray beasts, surveyors of highways, sealers of weights and measures, who check that the miller's scale and the merchant's yardstick tell the truth. In some towns, a chimney viewer who inspects hearths and flues, and, as you've heard, the tithingman, after 1675, Massachusetts law formally assigns one for every 10 families, a sworn neighborhood inspector of Sabbath keeping, tavern hours, and family order. The fire rules alone could fill an evening. Your houses are wood. Your roofs in the early years are thatch. Your chimneys, in the very first years, are sometimes nothing but timber and clay, and your town has seen what one stray spark can do. So Boston, as early as 1631, banned thatched roofs and wooden chimneys outright. Chimneys must be swept on schedule. A chimney that catches fire from neglect brings a fine. Households are ordered to keep a ladder that reaches the ridgepole and a bucket ready. When the cry of fire goes up, every able body is expected in the bucket line, and the town's fire hooks, great iron hooks on poles for pulling down burning roofs, hang ready at the meeting house. Even smoking is a fire rule as much as a morals rule. Taking tobacco out of doors near houses, barns, and hayricks is forbidden in town after town, which is why the old men smoke their pipes sitting on the doorstone, carefully, like men handling a small dragon. Even the money in your pocket is a rule, and a gently rebellious one. For decades, the colony suffers a shortage of coin. You pay your debts in corn, in beaver, in wampum at the legal rate. So in 1652, Massachusetts does something colonies are absolutely not supposed to do. It opens its own mint, and a Boston silversmith named John Hull begins striking the colony's own shillings, stamped with a pine tree. Minting coin is the king's prerogative, but conveniently in 1652, England has no king, and when the monarchy is restored and awkward questions arrive from London, the mint keeps striking coins dated 1652 for 30 years, as if time in Boston had politely stopped. It is, perhaps, the driest joke in colonial history, told in silver, an entire economy winking at the calendar. And notice finally who does all this governing. You do. The town meeting, every March and as often as needed, is your neighbors, assembled, voting on everything from the minister's firewood to the bounty on wolves to the seating of the meetinghouse. The men who view your fences and ring your hogs are not distant officials. They are the farmer across the brook, serving his year because the town voted him in, and the law fines him if he refuses. It is government by everyone, of everything all the time, endlessly meddlesome, endlessly local, and whatever else you may say of it, never once indifferent. Your descendants will keep the town meeting long after they have dropped nearly every other rule in this story. Some corners of New England will still be governing themselves this way 400 years from now, on a Tuesday in March, arguing about fences. Every town has an edge, the last fence, the last cleared field, the line where the lanes give out and the great forest begins. And your world, which regulates the center of town down to the slashes in a sleeve, has rules for the edges too. Rules about where you may live, how you may travel, and what may and may not cross the line in either direction. The first is the strangest, and it goes to the very shape of the town. In the early years, Massachusetts ordered that no dwelling house be built more than half a mile from the meeting house. Half a mile. The law was aimed at scattering, at families drifting out to distant fertile bottomlands, where no bell could reach them and no neighbor could watch them, and it expresses, in a single sentence, the deepest instinct of your civilization. A family alone in the woods is a family in danger, spiritual and otherwise, and the town must stay gathered like coals in a fire, because a coal rolled away from the pile goes out. The rule proved impossible to enforce. Land hunger beat theology within a few years, and the court gave it up, but the instinct survived it. For generations, when New Englanders move, they move as towns, a new congregation, a new covenant, a new meeting house raised first, and the houses gathered close around it like chicks. Your world does not really believe in pioneers. It believes in swarms. Once roads must run between these towns, the roads themselves become everyone's burden, literally. The law requires each town to maintain its highways, and the town discharges the duty through compulsory labor. Every able man owes days of road work each year, summoned by the surveyor of highways with his own team and tools to mend the mires and lay the causeways. Skip your road days and you are fined. Your descendants will pay road taxes and money. You pay yours in mud, alongside your neighbors, several days a year, by order of the town meeting. Where the roads meet rivers, the rules thicken again. Ferries are licensed monopolies, with their fares fixed by the court. So much for a person, So much for a horse, posted and enforceable, and the ferryman holds his crossing the way the tavern keeper holds his license, as a public trust with obligations attached. He must attend his ferry. Travelers left shouting on a bank can complain to the magistrates, and do. And along the great roads, the same law that requires every town to keep an ordinary is knitting together something remarkable, a chain of licensed houses, a day's ride apart, each obliged to shelter the traveler, feed his horse, and observe the whole familiar liturgy of rules, posted rates, lawful hours, the 9 o'clock quiet. In your world, a journey is not an escape from regulation. It is a relay race through it. Beyond the fences, the forest itself has entries in the law books. Wolves press hard on the flocks in the early decades, and the towns respond with bounties, a payment for every wolf taken, voted at town meeting and recorded with perfect seriousness in the same books that seat the meeting house. Some towns dig wolf pits, some hire native hunters who are far better at it, and the taking of a wolf is a small public event, proof presented to the constable, and the bounty paid out in corn or coin. For a century, the war between the sheepfold and the forest runs through the town ledgers, entry by entry, and the wolves, in the end, lose. Meanwhile, the beasts inside the fences are governed like citizens. Every farmer's cattle and swine carry his earmark, a particular registered pattern of crops and slits and halfpennies cut in the ear, unique to his farm and recorded by the town clerk in the town book, where anyone may consult it. A stray beast found in the corn is driven to the pound by the field driver. The pound keeper describes it: color, age, markings, earmark. The description is published, the owner identified from the register, and the animal ransomed home for the damage plus fees. It is a complete system of livestock identification, registration, and recovery, running on a clerk's ledger and a pair of sharp scissors, and it works so well that towns will keep earmark registers going for 200 years. And at the farthest edge, where your town's world meets the much older world of the native nations, whose land this was, the rules grow strictest of all, and here the court is not merely fussy, but genuinely afraid. Trade with your native neighbors is confined to licensed traders. The free-for-all of every farmer swapping at his back fence is forbidden. The sale of guns, powder, and shot is banned outright, on pain of severe penalty, and the sale of strong liquor likewise. Laws passed and repassed, tightened and tightened again, precisely because they are broken. There is always someone whose greed outruns the rules, and the courts prosecute such men hard when they catch them. However you judge the colony's dealings, and there is much, over this century, that does not survive honest judgment. The law books at least show a government that understood the frontier ran on trust and tried, in its stern and imperfect way, to police its own side of the line. So even out here, at the edge of everything, past the last fence, on a road you helped shovel, riding toward a ferry with a posted fare, the rules ride with you, tucked in the saddlebag beside the bread with the baker's mark on it. There is no boundary stone in New England, on the far side of which you are simply on your own. Your neighbors would not consider that freedom. They would consider it exile, and they would send someone after you. Night in your town is not merely the absence of day. Night is a jurisdiction of its own, with its own rules, its own officers, and its own bell. The bell rings at 9 o'clock. In Boston, it tolls from the meetinghouse. In smaller towns, a drum may beat the hour instead. And when it sounds, the town begins, by law and custom together, to shut its eyes. Taverns must empty of townsfolk. 9 o'clock is the legal close of drinking hours, and a keeper who lets company sit later risks his license. Fires are to be covered. Lights, one by one, go out. To be found abroad in the lanes much after the bell, without a good and stated errand, is to be a night walker, and night walking in your world is an actual offense, written in the law books. It does not mean anything sinister by itself. It means simply being out at night without a reason. The night, your neighbor's reason, belongs to sleep, and a person awake in it owes the town an explanation. The men who collect those explanations are the watch. Every town of any size keeps one, a rotation of householders, serving turn by turn, who walk the streets from 10 at night until the small hours with a lantern, a staff, and, in the seaports, a wooden rattle to raise alarm. Their instructions, preserved in the old records, are wonderfully specific. They are to walk their rounds slowly and silently, two by two. They are to examine any person found abroad, but to do it civilly. The Boston Watch is formally instructed to question night wanderers with as much moderation as may be. They are to see to it that no light or fire threatens the town, to note any door left swinging, and in some towns, on spying trouble or weather, to cry out the news. In parts of your world, the watchman calls the hours aloud as he goes, the time of night and the state of the sky, so that a family waking briefly in the dark hears a slow voice pass beneath the window. 1 o'clock and fair. They are the town's shepherds of the dark, and their footsteps are the sound of everyone else's permission to sleep. Indoors, the last rule of the day is the fire. An open flame left burning in a wooden town is everyone's danger. So the final act of every household, every night, is to bank the hearth, raking the coals together and burying them under ash, so they will neither die nor spread, dimmed down, held in, kept safe until morning. The old word for a fire cover, carried over from Norman French, is couvre-feu, cover fire, and it is the word your descendants will still be using, worn down to curfew, without remembering that it began as this, the nightly tucking in of the fire, and then the house settles. The great key turns, the dog circles and drops by the chimney. Upstairs, children are packed 2 and 3 to a bed, warm under wool. A warming pan has taken the worst chill off the sheets. Outside, frost ticks on the shingles, and far down the lane the watch passes with its swinging lantern, slow as the moon. Every soul in town is where the rules say a soul should be at this hour: home, abed, fire banked, candle out. For all the day's regulations, the nights are the gentlest. Be safe, be still, be sleeping. On this one point, you and the General Court of Massachusetts are in perfect agreement. By now, you may be wondering what actually happened when all these rules were broken, because, of course, they were broken constantly by ordinary people in ordinary ways, exactly as rules have been broken everywhere, always. And the answer says as much about your world as the rules themselves. The first thing to understand is that most punishment in your town is not violence, it is embarrassment. The characteristic instruments of New England justice are the fine and the apology, small sums, carefully graded by statute, and public acknowledgments, carefully staged. The stocks stand on every town green, and men do sit in them an hour or two, ankles pinned in the wooden frame, in full view of everyone they know. But the point of the stocks is not pain. The point is the view, the town walking past, seeing, knowing. In a community where reputation is currency, shame is the tax. There is even a certain rough equality in it. Among the very first people ever set in Boston's new stocks, the old story runs, was the carpenter who built them, punished for charging the town too much for the job. Whether it happened exactly so, your neighbors love the tale because it says the thing they most want said. The rules bind everyone, even their own maker. The court days themselves are almost a civic festival. The quarterly courts hear everything: fences, slander, wandering pigs, Sabbath breaking, short waits, long hair, and half the town turns out to listen. Punishments are tailored with an almost theatrical creativity. The paper worn on the breast describing the offense in capital letters, the cloth letter sewn to the sleeve, the offender standing at the meetinghouse door on lecture day. To modern eyes, it is mortifying, and it is meant to be. But watch what happens next, because this is the part your descendants usually miss. The offender confesses, publicly, formally, often in the meetinghouse, and then it is over. Confession is the hinge of the whole system. A person who acknowledges the fault makes restitution where restitution is due and asks the community's forgiveness is, in the normal course, restored, fine reduced or remitted, censure lifted, seat resumed, name cleared. Even excommunication from the church, the heaviest sentence your world can pronounce, is designed to be reversed. The records are full of members received back with open declarations of joy. The court records that preserve your neighbor's misdeeds in such embarrassing detail preserve, on the very next lines, their apologies and their restorations. The system is intrusive, judgmental, and relentless, and it is also, in its own severe way, built for mercy. It does not want to destroy you, it wants you back. Sentences of real severity exist for the crimes every society of the age punished hard, but they are rarer than the legend suggests, and rarer in practice than the statute books threaten. Magistrates temper the written law constantly. Juries acquit. Neighbors petition for clemency, and the petitions often work. For every dramatic punishment your descendants will remember, the archives hold 100 entries that read in essence: fined 5 shillings, acknowledged his fault, discharged. And yet, honesty requires this. Even at bedtime, the machinery of watching and judging could fail, and once, terribly, it did. In 1692, in and around Salem, fear slipped its harness, and the courts that were built to keep neighbors in covenant were turned for one dreadful year against the innocent. It is a grief that New England never forgot and never excused. What deserves remembering alongside it is what came after. Within 5 years, the colony held a public day of fasting and repentance for what had been done. Jurors signed a written declaration begging forgiveness, and Judge Samuel Sewall, one of the magistrates who had sat on that court, stood up in the Old South Meeting House in Boston while his confession was read aloud, taking upon himself, before the whole congregation, the blame and shame of it, and asking pardon of God and men. He kept a private day of penance every year for the rest of his life. The same culture that produced the tragedy produced almost alone in its century the public apology for it. Because if there was one thing your world truly believed, It was that no one, ever, is above acknowledging a fault. We have spent a whole night among the rules, so before the fire burns much lower, let's spend a few minutes on the myths, because the version of your neighbors that survives 400 years from now, the dour figure in black with the buckled hat, who hates joy in all its forms, is mostly an invention. You have met the buckle already. Here is the rest. Myth 1: The Puritans hated pleasure. You know better by now. They brewed beer at the college and required taverns by law. They feasted on Thanksgiving days until the tables groaned. They raced and wrestled on training days and stole kisses over red ears of corn at huskings. Their ministers wrote, in plain words, that God gave his creatures to be enjoyed, wine to gladden the heart, food, warmth, marriage, all of it lawful in its season. The rule was never no pleasure. The rule was pleasure in order, the right thing at the right time, in the right measure. You may quarrel with the measure, but a people who legislate a tavern into every town are not a people at war with delight. Myth 2: The Puritans were prudes about marriage. In fact, they scandalized Old England by insisting that marriage was for love and companionship, not just property and children, and, as you've heard, their churches disciplined husbands for coldness, and their courts defended wives against harshness. Their love letters glow. Their families were enormous, and their remarriage rates after loss were swift and hopeful. Whatever else the rules were, they were written by people who liked being married. Myth 3: They were ignorant zealots. This one collapses fastest of all. Within 6 years of landing in a wilderness, 6 years, while still sometimes short of food, they founded a college so that learning, as they put it, might not perish in the dust. They passed the first compulsory education laws in the English-speaking world, taxed themselves to build schools by statute, and printed books before they had proper roads. Their ministers were among the most learned men of the century, quoting Greek and Hebrew to farmers who could follow the argument, because the farmers could read. By the end of your century, New England's literacy rate is among the highest on earth. Say what you will about the old Deluder Satan Act. It worked. Myth 4: New England was a grim place to live and a worse place to grow old. The records say nearly the opposite. The cold, clean climate, the spread out farms, the ample food, your colony turns out to be one of the healthiest places in the 17th century world. New Englanders live remarkably long lives for their era. It is sometimes said that New England invented grandparents because it was one of the first societies in centuries where surviving to meet your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren became ordinary. Households hold 3 living generations at once, something rare almost everywhere else on earth. All those children, named Thankful and Preserved, grow up knowing the old people who named them, and the old people, in a world with rules about honoring age, sit at the front of the meeting house and are listened to. There are worse fates. Myth 5, the subtlest one, that the rules were imposed on an unwilling people by a caste of grim ministers. But the ministers of your colony hold no civil office. The law bars clergy from the magistracy, and for decades bars them even from performing weddings. The rules are written by elected assemblies, enforced by elected constables, adjusted at town meetings where every freeman's voice is heard, and funded by taxes the towns vote on themselves. That is what makes your world so strange and so hard to dismiss. The watching, the fines, the seating charts, the Sabbath stillness. Your neighbors chose all of it, openly, year after year, because they believed a community should hold itself to something. Their great great grandchildren will keep the town meeting, the public school, the Thanksgiving table, and the deep suspicion that somebody, somewhere, is having fun the wrong way. The inheritance, like most inheritances, arrives all tangled together. No set of rules this strict holds forever, and yours begin to loosen within living memory of the people who wrote them. The first crack is generational, and it appears exactly where you would expect in church. The founders were a self selected people, men and women who had crossed an ocean for their convictions, and who could stand before a congregation and testify to the workings of grace in their own souls, which is what full church membership required. Their children, born on this side of the water into comfortable farms, were baptized and believing, but many could not honestly claim the same shattering experience their parents had sailed on and would not pretend to. And so, by mid century, the churches faced a quiet crisis: what to do with the grandchildren of the saints. The answer, in 1662, was the compromise history calls the halfway covenant, allowing the children of baptized but unconverted parents to be baptized themselves halfway into the fold. The older generation grumbled that the fire was cooling. It was. Fires do. Then the world outside pushed in. In 1684, the old charter, the legal foundation of the whole experiment, was revoked by England, and the new royal charter of 1691 rewrote the deepest rule of all: the vote would now follow property, not church membership. Royal governors arrived, and with them Anglican chaplains, Christmas services, and fashions from London. The sumptuary laws faded from enforcement. Lace crept back. The ban on Christmas was already gone, and now there were people in Boston keeping the day openly. Judge Sewall's diary, over the decades, records the losing battle in miniature, his quiet satisfaction each December that most shops stayed open, his dismay at wigs, at revels, at the world drifting. The tide was coming in an inch at a time, and everyone could see it. But here is what your descendants should notice: the rules did not so much die as change clothes. The Sabbath laws relaxed by degrees, yet blue laws, Sunday closing laws, the Sabbath's civil ghost, will still be turning off the lights in New England shops 300 years later, and a few will survive into the 21st century. The compulsory schools never close. They grow into the American public school. The town meeting never adjourns. The Thanksgiving days become Thanksgiving. Even the watching survives, in gentler forms. The town that knows your business, the neighbor at the fence, the letter to the editor, the school committee, the deep New England conviction that the community has a rightful opinion about you. The scaffolding of rules came down slowly over generations. The habits it shaped were, by then, load-bearing. In a sense, the strangest thing about the strange rules of New England is how much of your world was built by them and is still standing. So come back, one last time, to the little wooden house where you woke this morning, because the day is over now, and the rules, for once, are all on your side. It is past 9. The bell has rung. The ordinary has emptied, its keeper wiping the boards by candlelight, within the law by a comfortable quarter hour. Down the lane, the watch is beginning its slow rounds two shapes and a lantern, walking as instructed, slowly and silently, and with as much moderation as may be. The tithing man is asleep, the fence viewer is asleep, the hog reeve is asleep, and so, presumably, are the hogs. In your house, the evening has followed its unchangeable order. Supper cleared, the chapter read aloud, the psalm sung low, the children's prayers heard and answered with good night. The fire has been banked with the great shovel, coals raked close and buried soft under ash, the couvre-feu, the cover fire, the oldest curfew in the world, keeping tomorrow's warmth safe underneath tonight's stillness. The candle has been carried up the narrow stair, throwing its ring of light on whitewashed boards, and blown out. And now you are in bed, deep in the goose feathers, under wool that smells faintly of cedar from the chest. The sheets were cold and are warming. Beside you, or in the next bed, or through the thin wall, the people you belong to are breathing slower and slower. Outside, the wind is moving through the great pines, the same sound it made before any of the rules existed, the same sound it will make after every one of them is gone. Think, as your thoughts loosen, how strange it all was, and how familiar. A town that fined men for their boots and their oaths, that assigned every soul a bench and every hour a purpose, that banned Christmas and required taverns, that could not let a fence sag or a stranger linger or a pot boil on Sunday. A town that watched you constantly, and in watching held you constantly. No one hungry, no one idle, no one alone, no one, in the end, unforgiven, who was willing to say the words. Your descendants will keep almost none of the rules. They will keep the schools, the meetings, the long table in November, and a certain unmistakable conscience. And on quiet nights, in old towns, where the streetlights stand where the watch once walked, some of them will still feel it, that old New England sensation of being gently and permanently kept an eye on. But that is their concern, and centuries away. Yours is simpler. The fire is covered, the door is barred, the bell has rung, and the whole town, the magistrates and the mischief makers, the scolds and the singers, the governor in Boston and the boys who ran on the Sabbath, all of it is asleep, or soon will be, under the same cold stars. The law of the colony, in its final ruling of the day, requires exactly one thing more of you: rest. The watchman's voice drifts up from the end of the lane, unhurried, half a lullaby, telling the hour to no one awake enough to need it. 10 o'clock, and all is well. Thank you for spending this night in old New England. If you drifted off somewhere between the meetinghouse and the 9 o'clock bell, that is exactly as it should be. The video will be here tomorrow, and so will the rest of our journeys, waiting in the Drowsy History Library whenever you need them. Good night from the little town by the bay. May your fire stay banked, your fences stand tall, and your name stay out of the court records. Rest easy. Sleep well. This is Drowsy History.